They told me not to come home for Thanksgiving, after I'd spent over $8,000 to keep their house warm. No warning, just, Claire's been anxious. Better if you stayed put. Hi, I'm Rachel. I've worked double shifts, skipped meals, and paid every winter heating bill since 2021. But the moment I stopped being useful, I was cut out, like I never mattered. So I canceled the one thing they'd feel the most, heat. Have you ever been the one holding everything together until you realized no one was holding you? Tell me, what would you have done? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm listening. The wind slipped through the old window frame as I dropped my work bag by the door. I kicked off my boots, not bothering to straighten them. My feet were sore. 10 hours walking concrete floors at the warehouse would do that to you. The heat from my space heater buzzed gently in the corner, trying its best against the creeping chill of late October in St. Paul. I wrapped myself in the oversized cardigan I kept draped over the chair and shuffled into the kitchen. The kettle had already cooled, so I reheated it, poured water over a peppermint tea bag, and sat down at the little dining table. My eyes landed on the photo album I'd pulled off the shelf the night before. The spine was cracked, and one of the corners was peeling. Flipping it open, I paused at the picture from Thanksgiving 2019. We were all there, me, Claire, Mom, and Dad. The table was too crowded with dishes, the lighting a bit too yellow, and my smile not quite as wide as Claire's. That year, I'd worked an early shift, taken 2 buses, and still arrived in time to set the table. I remember doing the dishes alone that night, while Claire live-streamed herself making cocktails in the living room. I set the photo album aside. The tea was still too hot to drink. The heat in the apartment wasn't great, but it was steady, and it was mine. That's when the phone rang. I checked the screen. Dad. I hesitated, thumb hovering above the answer button. Something in my chest tightened. Then I hit speaker and leaned back. Hi, I said. Hey, Rachel. His voice was light, too light. Listen, just wanted to give you a quick update about Thanksgiving. I waited. He always took the long way around things. We talked it over and, well, we think it's best if you sit this one out. Just this year. I blinked. What? He exhaled like I was making it difficult. Claire's been a bit on edge lately. You know how she gets. We just thought keeping things low-key might help. I didn't answer right away. I glanced around the room. The plant by the window had started to brown at the tips again. I'd watered it yesterday. So, I said slowly, you're uninviting me. Because Claire's anxious. No, he said quickly. Not uninviting, just suggesting. It's better if you stayed put this time. You don't need the travel stress anyway. I felt my jaw clench. Dad, I've sent over $2,000 just since January to help with the heating oil. I've paid that furnace bill every month, but sure, let's talk about stress. That's not what this is about, he said, sounding suddenly defensive. Let's not bring money into this. I stared at the teacup in my hand. The steam had faded. Funny, I said, because money seems to come up only when I offer it, not when I'm cut out. There was a pause on the line. The hum of silence from his end filled the room. It's just one dinner, Rachel. It's not. My voice cracked, and I hated that. It's another reminder of where I stand. Family is family, he said, the old line, the safe one. Claire's just going through a lot. Try to understand. I nodded to no one. I do understand. I'm just finally tired of pretending I don't notice. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, he added. I ended the call. For a few seconds, I just sat there. My fingers trembled slightly, not from cold, but from something heavier. I got up and walked over to the desk in the corner. My laptop was still plugged in from last night. I opened the lid, clicked through the tabs until I found the utility payment portal. My name, my card, my quiet contribution to keeping their house warm. The payment schedule flashed on the screen. Next charge, November 2nd. I hovered the cursor over the Cancel Auto Pay button. Part of me waited, maybe for a message, a follow-up, a change of tone. Nothing came. I clicked. A small notification popped up. Service scheduled to stop November 2nd. I stared at it, then closed the laptop. The heater hummed softly. The tea had gone cold. I took a sip anyway, but the warmth I had craved was already gone. In that moment, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel powerful. I just felt done. And oddly, there was something peaceful about that. The banana bread had just come out of the oven, filling my apartment with that thick, comforting scent of browned butter and cinnamon. I let it cool on the stovetop while Chet Baker played soft on the speaker in the corner. Outside, the wind brushed up against the windows in short, dry bursts, tapping now and then like it was asking to come in. I pulled my sleeves down over my hands and leaned on the counter. November had arrived, crisp and quiet. The kind of cold that didn't announce itself. It just took up space. I opened my phone to check the time, and the first message blinked across the screen. Mom. Something's off with the furnace. It read. No punctuation, no greeting. Just 6 quiet words, like smoke slipping under a door. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the freezer and pulled out a bag of frozen blueberries, the ones I'd saved for this recipe. I mashed a few with a fork and swirled them into a small bowl of yogurt. My heater hummed steadily behind me, warming the soles of my feet through the floorboards. I thought back to last winter, when Claire had decided she wanted to start a handmade candle business. Artisanal tea scents, she'd called them. She had posted an entire Instagram reel of her sampling wax melts like she was auditioning for a perfume ad. Within 2 months, she had burned through most of her savings. The supplier had overcharged her. The labels were printed wrong, and her soft launch never quite took off. She cried to Mom. Mom cried to Dad. Dad called me. The house was freezing, he'd said. Pipes would burst if the oil wasn't refilled. I canceled the coat I had been saving up for that winter. It was supposed to be navy wool, warm enough to survive a Minnesota January. Instead, I pulled on 2 hoodies for the next 3 months and paid the oil company in full. This year, I wore my old parka. It had a broken zipper and a small tear under one sleeve, but I no longer felt like apologizing for it. My phone buzzed again. Claire this time. Literally freezing in my own house. What a vibe! I stared at the screen for a long second, then set it face down. That was Claire's way. Never asking, never acknowledging, just implying. She'd always had a knack for dramatic discomfort. I'd spent most of my 20s covering her financial mistakes like they were spilled wine, quickly and without drawing attention, but I wasn't doing that anymore. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. There it was again, the confirmation from the heating company sitting in my inbox like a quiet truth. I clicked it open. Cancellation confirmed. No further billing scheduled. I read the line twice, slowly. Then I closed the lid and looked out the window. Somewhere, an old tree branch tapped against the roof. There was still no snow, but the air had a sharpness now, like it had teeth. I heard the buzz of my phone again. Voicemail. I picked it up and saw my dad's name. I hesitated. Then I played it. His voice came through, a little raspy, a little too loud. Rachel, the house is at 55 degrees. I don't know what's going on, but we need to talk. Call me back. He didn't say please. He never did. I listened to half the message, then hit delete. No one ever called to say thank you when the house stayed warm. I walked over to the heater and turned the dial up 1 notch. The fan kicked in softly. A warm gust began to rise. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and sat down at the small table by the window. The banana bread had cooled just enough to slice. I cut a thick piece, still steaming at the center, and poured myself a cup of cocoa. The mug was one I'd bought on clearance last spring. Pale blue with a chip on the handle, just enough imperfection to make it mine. I added a few marshmallows, watched them melt slightly and stirred slowly. Then I held the cup close and took a deep breath. It didn't fix anything, but it was the first warm decision I'd made for myself in a very long time. The morning started quietly, just like the others. My apartment was still warm from the space heater, and the scent of yesterday's banana bread still clung faintly to the air. Outside, the trees bent just slightly in the wind. That kind of pre-storm sway that told you Minnesota was about to get serious. I'd bundled myself in 2 scarves and a wool coat before heading out. The sidewalk crunched underfoot, and a thin layer of frost glazed the car roofs. The bookstore on the corner had just opened when I arrived, warm light spilling out onto the sidewalk like an invitation. I made my way to the nonfiction section, past shelves that smelled like coffee and old paper. A small book caught my eye, How to Say No Without Apologizing. I picked it up, flipped through the first few pages, then carried it to the counter without a second thought. Back home, I poured a fresh cup of tea, lemon and ginger this time. The mug warmed my hands while I sat near the window and listened to the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The family group chat had been quiet for 3 days now. No updates, no forwarded recipes, no check-ins. Only Claire's social media offered any clues. Her latest post, a picture of her in thick socks curled up under a blanket. Caption, "House is a literal freezer." Guess we know who doesn't care anymore. No names, of course. But it didn't need names. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my voicemail. Another message had come in late last night. Dad again. "Claire's been coughing. Your mom won't say it, but she's not okay either. The furnace is making weird noises. Call me back when you can." I deleted it without listening to the rest. The couch creaked as I leaned back. I reached for my phone and tapped Jenna's name. She answered on the second ring, her camera off but voice clear. "Hey you, how's the Frost Queen?" "Still holding court," I said. "They've gone from passive to dramatic." Jenna chuckled. "Let me guess. Claire's sending haikus about frostbite." "Close," I said. "Instagram therapy in sock form." She sighed. "It always falls on us, doesn't it? The ones who figure out bills, return the rental car, fix the printer. We're invisible until something breaks." I smiled at that. Pretty sure I'm the heating system in human form. We talked for a few more minutes about her night shift, her plans for Thanksgiving at a friend's cabin. I envied her clarity. She had drawn lines years ago and stuck to them. I hadn't. Not until now. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept my receipts and bills. I pulled out a notebook and a pen and started writing. Every payment since 2021. January 2021, $380 heating oil. March 2021, $215 pipe repair. December 2021, $610 emergency refill. February 2022, $425. October 2023, $410. It filled nearly a full page. I didn't realize how much it had added up until I saw it in ink. I tore out the sheet and stuck it on the fridge with a plain black magnet. No decorations, no commentary, just facts. The kind no one in my family seemed interested in. My phone buzzed again. Claire this time. Text, "You're punishing us. You'll regret this." I stared at it for a long moment. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for once, I didn't feel like justifying anything. I typed slowly, "If peace means pretending I don't exist, keep it." Then I hit send and turned off notifications. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows. I walked over to the storage bin near the door and pulled out a roll of thermal window film. It crackled faintly in my hands. I hadn't used it in years, not since the first time I moved out on my own. But it came back to me. The way you pressed the plastic flat, sealed the edges with heat, and watched it tighten like shrink wrap over a gift. I worked slowly, carefully smoothing the corners. When I finished, the living room window glowed faintly with layered protection. Not beautiful, but solid, effective. A new alert flashed across my phone screen. Winter storm watch, greater Minnesota area. I took a deep breath and wrapped my blanket tighter around my shoulders. They never learned how to do this. I did. The knock came just after sunset. 3 soft raps, then a pause. Not hurried, not tentative, just expected. I didn't check the peephole. I already knew it was him. The snow had started falling again about an hour earlier, brushing gently against the windows in slow, steady sheets, the kind that didn't stop for days. I'd lit 2 candles on the counter, not for light, just for comfort, and the chicken soup on the stove had begun to simmer, sending curls of steam into the warm kitchen air. I tightened the belt of my cardigan and walked slowly to the door. My hand hovered over the knob for a beat before I unlocked it and opened it just a crack. There he was. My father, Robert Monroe, 71 years old, still too proud to wear a scarf. His coat looked too thin for the cold, and the snow clung to the shoulders like dust on an old coat rack. His face was red from the wind, his breath visible in short, foggy bursts. "Rachel," he said, voice clipped, "we need to talk." I didn't move, just leaned slightly against the edge of the door frame. His eyes scanned the space behind me. The glow from the kitchen, the soft hum of the jazz station I always left on low volume. He cleared his throat. "Claire's sick. Your mother hasn't slept in days. It's 38 degrees in the house. The furnace hasn't kicked in since Monday." I let that sit for a moment. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. He blinked. "This isn't the time to be cold." I met his gaze. "You told me to stay away." There was a long pause. Wind rushed past behind him, whistling down the hallway of the apartment building like it had somewhere more important to be. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "You're being petty." I raised an eyebrow. "Petty." He shook his head, exasperated. "This isn't punishment? Withholding heat? Watching your mother freeze?" "You mean like I watched her ignore me for years?" My voice didn't rise, but the words were clear. While I took double shifts, skipped meals, and covered thousands of dollars in bills so this wouldn't happen? "I didn't come here for a lecture," he said tightly. "No," I replied. "You came here to fix a leak that only mattered once it reached you." He let out a breath, the kind that sounded like it carried history. "Look, Claire's been through a rough year. The podcast failed. The lease on her studio—" "Stop." I held up a hand. "You always do this. List excuses like they're explanations. Claire makes a mess. You clean it up, I pay the bill, and no one ever says thank you. They just say again." "She's fragile," he muttered. I laughed quietly. "So am I. The only difference is no one noticed when I cracked." He looked tired now. Not angry, just worn down. "I thought we were family," he said after a moment. I nodded. "So did I. Until family became something I paid into but wasn't welcome to sit with." His eyes narrowed. "You're rewriting history." "No," I said softly. "I'm just refusing to foot the bill for it." I took a slow breath and looked him straight in the eye. "I didn't cut you off," I said. "I just stopped paying to stay invisible." For a moment, neither of us moved. His boots left small puddles on the welcome mat. My hands rested quietly on the edge of the door. Then I stepped back and gently, firmly closed the door. It clicked shut with a sound softer than I expected. No slam, no drama, just closure. I locked it out of habit, then turned and walked toward the stove. The soup had started to bubble, golden fat forming tiny rings on the surface. I stirred it slowly, watching the swirl of carrots and celery in the pot. In the silence that followed, I felt something shift inside me. Not pride, not satisfaction, just warmth. The kind that comes when you finally step out of someone else's cold. The door buzzer rang at 8:17 a.m. I was just pulling the rolls out of the oven, their tops golden, scent rich with rosemary and butter. The apartment was still dim, soft winter light filtering through the curtains. I had planned for a quiet Thanksgiving. Warm bread, coffee, maybe a documentary in the afternoon. No drama, no obligations, no visitors. But there she was. I checked the peephole like I always did, but I already knew. My mother stood on the porch, bundled awkwardly in a puffy coat too big for her frame, holding a faded green grocery bag, and wrapped around her neck, my old scarf. The burgundy one from college, the one she used to say was too scratchy. I hadn't seen it in years. I didn't open the door right away. The last time she'd come unannounced was my sophomore year, when I had taken a semester off after a medical scare. Back then, she had brought fruit and vitamins and a magazine with bold letters across the cover. 10 Ways to Bounce Back. She hadn't asked how I felt. She just handed me a schedule and said I'd feel better with structure. This time, she didn't look like she'd brought a plan. I cracked the door open an inch, letting the warmth of the apartment spill out into the cold hallway. "Hi," she said, voice small. "I know it's early." I nodded. "You walked here?" "Took the bus most of the way," she replied. "Walked from the light rail." She clutched the bag tighter. "I won't stay long," she added quickly. I didn't know how much longer I could wait." I didn't answer. Just opened the door another inch and stepped aside enough for her to feel the heat on her face. She didn't step in. That felt right. "I was wrong," she said after a breath. "For a long time." Her eyes didn't meet mine. She was looking at the floor, at the tile where melted snow was forming small puddles around her boots. "You were helping more than anyone," she said, "and I let it become invisible. I told myself we were holding things together. I told myself Claire needed calm, that your father needed someone to just keep things even. I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe it would all smooth out." I folded my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Did it?" She shook her head. "I thought it was keeping peace," she continued. "But I see now it was just keeping silence." My throat felt tight, but I said nothing. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small container. "I brought sweet potatoes, the ones you liked when you were a kid." "I'm 33, Mom," I said softly. "I buy my own groceries." She nodded, her eyes brimming. "I know." The silence stretched. I remembered the only other time she'd said sorry. I was 9, and she had burned the Thanksgiving rolls, the kitchen filled with smoke, the fire alarm chirping. I cried because I thought Thanksgiving was ruined. She knelt beside me and said she was sorry, then slathered warm butter on the darkest roll and gave it to me with an extra hug. That had felt simple, real. This felt heavier. "I know I didn't say anything when I should have," she whispered, "but I was scared if I took your side, everything would fall apart." I stared at her, expression unreadable even to myself. "Do you regret needing me?" I asked. "Only after I stopped giving?" She looked up, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I took a breath, then opened the door just a little wider. Not enough to invite her in, but enough to let the warmth of my apartment reach her fully. The smell of the rolls, the soft jazz playing, the heater humming beneath the windows. "I'm not angry anymore," I said quietly. "But I'm not coming back either." She nodded again, slow and shaky. "I understand." She handed me the bag. I didn't take it. Instead, I watched as she stepped back, her boots crunching lightly against the salted tile floor. She paused at the edge of the hallway, turned, and walked away. She left the scarf behind, draped neatly over the porch railing. I closed the door slowly, let the lock click into place. The apartment felt quiet again, still. I picked up the scarf, shook off the snow, and folded it carefully. It was thinner than I remembered. I placed it in the drawer next to the emergency candles, between the matches and a flashlight. I stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the drawer's edge. Sometimes an apology doesn't fix a thing, but it leaves behind something soft. The cold never let up. Temperatures stayed below freezing most days, and snow still blanketed the sidewalks in uneven patches. The wind rattled the apartment windows from time to time, trying to find a way in. But this time, it didn't get through. Not to the rooms, and not to me. January moved slower than December. The rush of holidays had passed. The city felt quieter, more hushed. I woke that morning to the scent of ground coffee and the sound of the heater humming steadily near the kitchen. No buzzing phone, no missed calls. Just the usual. My slippers waiting near the bed, the robe I'd hung up the night before, and a blank page in my journal. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug and sat by the window, writing the date carefully at the top of the page. I watched the afternoon sun stretch across the hardwood floor like honey poured slowly, a light that softened everything. My eyes drifted to the fridge, where the paper still hung. The heating log. I'd almost forgotten it was there. I walked over, looked it over line by line, each payment scribbled in ink, each dollar accounted for. I stopped at the last entry, November 2nd, 2023, canceled, final dollar, peace of mind. I didn't take the page down. It didn't make me bitter. It just reminded me how far I'd come. My phone lit up on the counter. Jenna. I answered with a soft smile. Hey, did I wake you? Nope, been up a while. She paused, then chuckled. So, Claire's at it again. Should I ask? She posted a crying video, something about being abandoned by her sister, left out in the cold, literally and emotionally. Called you... what was it? Oh, calculating. I let out a short laugh. That's new. Jenna sighed. The comments are a mess, half sympathy, half confusion. I'm not surprised. There was another pause. I figured you should know, she said, in case someone sends it to you. Let her, I said simply. I didn't mean it cruelly, just honestly. Let her say what she needed to say. Let her tell the version of the story where I was the villain. I didn't need to correct her anymore. I'm just glad you're okay, Jenna said. I am, I said, more than I thought I'd be. After the call, I layered on a thick sweater and boots, wrapped a scarf twice around my neck, and headed out for a walk. The snow crunched beneath each step and the wind nipped at my cheeks, but it felt clear, alive. I stopped by the corner bookstore. The owner gave me a quiet nod of recognition. I browsed the shelves, fingertips grazing spines until one caught my eye. A memoir titled, Boundaries Built Me. I smiled at the title, turned it over in my hands, then brought it to the counter. Back home, I lit a candle, the lavender one I'd been saving for no reason at all, and queued up a playlist of soft piano songs, the kind that made everything feel just a little slower, a little more intentional. I curled into the couch, blanket over my legs, book open, steam rising from a fresh cup of tea. Hours passed like minutes, and when I finally reached for my journal again, I didn't write much, just one sentence. Family is who warms you back. That was enough. The heater hummed steadily as I closed my journal, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I had drawn a line not in anger, but in care, for myself. Sometimes love means showing up, but other times it means stepping away when your presence is only valued in silence. In family, warmth isn't just about who stays close. It's about who notices when you're gone and who finally learns to keep the fire going without you. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections or pass it along to someone who needs a little warmth today. After all, stories are best when they help us feel a little less alone.